quaint town of Brighton, Emma found herself pacing the living room, shadows dancing across her walls. She had just moved into a new apartment, one that was old but affordable. Little did she know the building held more than just dusty memories. One evening, while scrolling through her phone, she received a call from an unknown number. Curious, she answered, "Hello?" There was a long pause, followed by a distorted voice. "Can you hear me?" "Yes, who is this?" Emma asked, her heart rate quickening. A heavy breath echoed through the line. "I've been watching you." Emma's blood ran cold. "What do you want?" The line went dead. She tried to dismiss it as a prank, but the calls became more frequent, each one more unsettling than the last. One night, the voice mentioned details about her daily routine that no one could know. "You wore a blue dress today. You looked lovely." Emma felt the walls closing in on her. She decided to call the police, but they found nothing. The number was untraceable. Desperate for answers, Emma began investigating the history of her apartment. She discovered that a previous tenant, a man named Henry, had mysteriously disappeared years ago. The locals whispered about his obsession with his neighbor, who had moved out soon after his disappearance. Determined to uncover the truth, Emma visited the abandoned basement of the building. She stumbled upon an old, dusty phone. It rang as she approached, vibrating with an eerie energy. Her hand trembled as she answered. The familiar, distorted voice greeted her. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Emma's heart pounded in her chest. "Who are you?" The voice chuckled, a chilling sound that echoed through the basement. "I'm right behind you." She spun around, but there was no one. The shadows seemed to shift, taking form. In the dim light, she saw a figure, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. Emma screamed, dropping the phone. The figure advanced, and she felt a cold hand on her shoulder. The next morning, the police found her lifeless body in the basement, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. The calls stopped, but the legend of the stranger's call lived on, a cautionary tale whispered among the residents of Brighton. Emma's apartment remained vacant, for those who dared to enter never stayed long. The echoes of a stranger's voice haunted their nights, reminding them that some mysteries are best left unsolved. Lila had always been a vivid dreamer. Most nights she would wake up clutching fragments of bizarre, disjointed worlds, some enchanting, others terrifying. But nothing could prepare her for the night when her dreams began to spill into reality. It started with the mirror. In her dream, she was standing in her bedroom, staring at the large antique mirror her grandmother had gifted her. The room was identical to her real one, down to the crack in the floorboards and the faint hum of her bedside clock. But her reflection was wrong. While she stood still, the reflection tilted its head and smiled, a wide, unnatural grin that stretched too far. "You're not awake," the reflection whispered, its voice crackling like static. "Not yet." Lila jolted awake, gasping for air. Her heart hammered as she scanned the room. Everything was normal. The mirror stood silently in its corner, reflecting her disheveled figure as she got up to inspect it. Her reflection mimicked her every move perfectly. Relieved, she chuckled nervously and went back to bed. But the dreams continued. Each night, she would return to the same version of her room, always beginning in front of the mirror. Each time, her reflection became more alive, blinking when she didn't, speaking when she tried to stay silent. One night, it said, "Soon I'll be the one waking up." She awoke drenched in sweat, her hands trembling as she touched her face to make sure she was real. Something felt off. The air in her room was colder than usual, and the mirror seemed darker, as though it was absorbing the light instead of reflecting it. She threw a blanket over it, determined to block it from view. But the next morning, the blanket was gone. Lila searched everywhere, only to find it crumpled in the hallway. The mirror, now uncovered, gleamed ominously. She swore the reflection was grinning when she looked at it. By the third week, her waking life became indistinguishable from the dreams. She'd find herself standing in front of the mirror without remembering how she got there. Sometimes her reflection would speak, even when she was fully awake. "You look tired," it would say, its voice dripping with malice. "Why don't you rest? I can take over." Her friends noticed the change in her. She became withdrawn, distracted, and pale. They dismissed her fears as stress, even when she begged them to come to her apartment and look at the mirror. When they did, they saw nothing unusual. "You're scaring yourself, Lila," her best friend Sarah said. "It's just a mirror." But Lila knew better. The final night came without warning. Lila fell asleep after hours of tossing and turning, only to find herself once again in the dream. This time, her reflection was waiting for her, not in the mirror but standing in the center of the room. "You're so weak now," it sneered, circling her. "Do you even know if you're awake?" Lila screamed, backing into the wall. She pinched herself, slapped her face, did everything she could to wake up, but nothing worked. The reflection's grin widened as it reached out, grabbing her wrist. "Your turn to dream," it whispered. When Lila woke up, everything felt different. The room was brighter, the air lighter. She laughed shakily, brushing it off as another nightmare. But when she looked in the mirror, her reflection didn't move. It stood frozen, mouth open in a silent scream, banging on the glass from the other side. She was the reflection now. And the thing in her body? It smiled. Crestwood School stood on the outskirts of a small town, its once vibrant walls now cloaked in a creeping blanket of decay. Abandoned for years, it had become a place of whispered legends and unsettling tales. Yet, on one fateful night, a group of friends decided to explore its haunted halls. Emily, Jack, Sarah, and Mark, driven by a mix of curiosity and the need for a thrilling adventure, slipped through the rusty gates as the full moon cast eerie shadows on the crumbling structure. Armed with flashlights and a sense of bravado, they stepped into the darkened corridor. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of mildew lingered. Their footsteps echoed through the silent halls, creating an unsettling symphony. As they ventured deeper, they stumbled upon an old, locked classroom. The door creaked open, revealing desks covered in a layer of grime and forgotten books scattered across the floor. "Let's check it out," Jack whispered, his voice trembling with both excitement and fear. Emily's flashlight flickered, casting erratic beams of light. "Did you see that?" she gasped, pointing towards the back of the room. The group turned their attention to a large, cracked mirror that hung on the wall. Reflections of their anxious faces stared back at them, but something was off. In the corner of the mirror, a shadowy figure seemed to loom, its eyes gleaming with malevolence. "That's just our reflection," Mark said, trying to steady his voice. But as he stepped closer, the shadow moved, its form shifting and growing. Sarah's grip on her flashlight tightened. "We should leave," she urged, her voice barely above a whisper. Just as they turned to exit, the classroom door slammed shut with a deafening bang. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. The air grew colder and an oppressive silence filled the room. Suddenly, the mirror shattered, and the shadowy figure emerged, its form twisting and writhing. It was a dark, menacing presence, its face obscured by a veil of darkness. Whispers filled the room, unintelligible and haunting. "Who dares to disturb my slumber?" a voice echoed, sending chills down their spines. The friends huddled together, their hearts pounding. The figure advanced, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Emily's flashlight flickered again, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. "We're sorry," Jack cried out, his voice cracking. "We didn't mean to." Before he could finish, the figure raised a skeletal hand, and the temperature plummeted. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over them as the figure's grip tightened on their minds. "Leave, and never return," the voice hissed. In a frenzy of terror, the group scrambled for the door, their frantic attempts finally forcing it open. They burst out into the hallway, gasping for breath, and sprinted towards the exit. The oppressive presence seemed to chase them, its whispers growing louder and more frantic. As they burst through the gates and into the moonlit night, the whispers abruptly ceased. Crestwood School stood silent and still, its dark secrets hidden once more. Breathless and shaken, the friends vowed never to speak of their harrowing encounter again. But the memory of the shadowy figure and its chilling whispers would forever haunt their dreams, a reminder of the darkness that lingered within the abandoned halls of Crestwood School.